Thank you so much, Ashwini ma'am, for joining us today. I hope we can begin the session, Vikas sir.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Well, thank you, Madhulika, and thank you, Professor Vikas, for organizing this and for inviting me. And I hope that we can have a good conversation about this topic. So, since it's going to be like um, people in the philosophy group and a lot of people, a lot of audience that we already know, I would appreciate if you want to join in at the end, and if you have any questions, and also if you want to keep your cameras on, that's fine too. So thank you again to the group of philosophical counselors India to invite me and to talk about something that's COVID related. So ever since the COVID started last year, I've been giving a lot of talks on various concerns about counseling, various concerns people have, and what a difficult time it has been for everybody. We've all been affected, especially those of us who live in India or who have families in India. And, the COVID second wave has been tremendously disturbing for all of us concerned. And so, at a time like this, how do we come to grip with life and with the challenges of life? And suddenly, people are realizing that turning to philosophy gives some hope and some answers to our questions, and especially in these difficult times, perhaps it might be easier to turn to not only the ancient philosophy but also to the literature of our saints. So, the topic today I have is called The Moment We Live In, which is the current moment, the present, or whatever you want to call it, however you want to describe it. But it's now that we are talking about. And the story of our lives is full of ups and downs. The moment we have in our hands is what is under our control. When it passes, it becomes our past and it goes out of our control. And when we are waiting for the future, we choose to spend our current moment in the pursuit of the future. What we do with our present moment is what decides our destiny. Philosophers from all over the place, like from the East, from the West, and I'm sure from other places as well, talk about what is under our control and what is not under our control, and how do we deal with this. We will review some of the thinking on this topic today. So I'm going to refer to Saint Kabir a lot, but I will also be referring to our ancient texts such as the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and some of the modern philosophers. Uh, like I've chosen Eckhart Tolle from the US. I also talk about the Stoics because that is a subject that I have studied and researched a lot. So I guess we are going to sort of, have a conversation on some of the themes. And the themes are very simple. How do we deal with COVID? How do we utilize the present moment to the best of our capacity? And what is the solution that stops us from doing the most that we can with our present moment? So, as we said earlier, the present moment is really all that we have under our control. So instead of talking about, 100 different things that we should be learning, that we should be doing well, or that we should try and get a control over, why not focus on just now? And what is it that we want to do now? So obviously, we want to make the most of our current moment, and we try not to think about past, but so many times our past is what dominates us. And then there are anxieties about future that also dominate our current thinking. And this thinking becomes so muddy at times that we feel very helpless and we forget what we need to do or what we should do. And we get into a bigger and bigger layer of confusion and delusion. And then we find it very difficult to deal with life as such. And then it becomes sort of like, oh, my life is so difficult. So instead of going into that kind of global conclusion where we feel that the life is so difficult that is completely out of our reach, out of our control, we should bring it down to the current moment, to the present, and see what is it that stops us from living life to its utmost capacity. So one of the topics that Saint Kabir discusses in his philosophy quite often is how the Lord of Death, Yam or Jam, as he calls it in his writing, is always hanging around just behind us, lurking behind us. And normally we don't believe in such things because we believe that, we have life and we are planning so much, for our future birthdays, our future plans, our future things in life. And all of that is very pleasant at times. So we don't really want to think that, life is also mortal. But it is true. I mean, the two biggest facts about life are that there's a human birth and a human death, and in between is what we have, is what we call life. But again, the only moment that we have control over is our current moment. And then what happens when we start thinking about death? So Saint Kabir says, Jama karat nirasa, meaning that, it just makes us feel very depressed whenever we think about the end of life's situation, because that's not what we want to think about. We want to think about, like, good things and what can be done. But at the same time, it also gives us a perspective about life and what can be done. And it, in fact, makes living a life with purpose much more important, and it also makes it sort of binding for us to do the best we can so that we don't lose what we have under our control, and don't let it be dominated by anxieties, resentment, or worries about past or future. So the book that I'm briefly going to mention, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, also talks a lot about this and about his own spiritual journey, and about how he discovered that whatever happened in the past in his life has really no bearing on the present moment or on his future. Because once we decide that we are going to take things under our control, that we are going to take charge of our life, then whatever has happened in the past is really not that important. And we all have traumas in life. We all have problems. We all have our insecurities, our fears, or the way we have, dealt with some of the situations in the past may not be completely satisfactory to us. But at the same time, when we see that that was my past, and now we are going to deal with the now, not with the future, not with our problems, but with the now, then we start thinking about, like, what is it that we can do? And we try and think about it as a situation that is within our capacity to effect. So when we do that, then we are not thinking so much about anxieties about future, or we are not thinking so much about having guilt or resentment about the past, but we are trying to think of how best to deal with the situation. And when we have that sense of power, then whatever we choose to do is our choice. So, for example, the Stoics always talk about giving assent to your emotions or to your thoughts. So, according to the Stoics, whatever we do is really what we choose to do. So, for example, if there's a situation when somebody's been unfair to you and you need to figure out how to respond to that situation. If we yell at that person and tell them that I'm going to teach you a lesson, then that is a choice. If we just observe the situation and do nothing about it, that is also a choice. And if we decide to forgive the other person and say, you probably don't know what you're doing, but I know what I'm doing, that is also a choice. So, what the Stoics would say is that whatever you do is what you give permission to yourself to do, and that they call as giving assent. So, when we give assent to an emotion or to a reaction, then that is what we choose to do. So, according to the Stoics, whatever we do is really in our control. It's our choice. We have the power to do that. And it's the same thing that Eckhart Tolle calls as the power of now. So, to utilize that power, to understand that we are, responsible and capable of doing whatever actions we choose to do, they give you a lot of principles and say, okay, when you follow these principles, then you know that you have the capacity to choose the right thing. So now this right thing, choosing the right thing, is a very big topic of discussion both in Stoicism and in the Bhagavad Gita. So the Bhagavad Gita also talks about, like, how we should follow our duties. We should do our duties without expecting the fruit of the action. And when we focus on that, then we focus on the right thing to do. But if you always say that, oh, okay, if I um, put my money in this investment, then it'll give me, like, whatever 1% extra compared to any other investment, then it's perfectly possible that we are putting our money somewhere where it's not the um, most appropriate thing to do, because who knows how they are earning their money to pay us back. Or to take another example, we are students of philosophy, and we are trying to write a paper because there's some grant available in that area. And that area may have more grants available, so we might get, more chances of getting a scholarship or something. But if that's not the area that we really care for, that's not the area that we really sort of, are concerned about or we value, then working in that area would actually be a waste of time, at least for some period of time. And during that time, we might get distracted, whereas we would be putting that time to use in something that we really care and value about, without, thinking about the short-term grants. So basically, here the thinking is about short-term versus long-term, and whatever long-term is going to be beneficial, going to be the right thing to do, then we should try and focus on that instead of focusing on the short term happiness. So, now does it contradict with what we are talking about? Because now it's really short term in a way, and it's not about future. So it doesn't, because when we do the right thing, it doesn't mean that we are doing something that would be incorrect in the future, but it's the right thing because that is a demand of the time, and that is how we reason and decide what the right thing is. So most of the times, what prevents us from doing what is right is really our anxiety about future. And to understand the anxiety about future, we are going to go a little bit towards evolutionary biology and to the Upanishads. So, one major thought in the evolutionary biology is that life is always at risk, that it was a life full of hunter gatherers, and they were always trying to make sure that they survived. And to survive, they had to sort of like compete with other wild animals for the same goods, such as food resources, or safety resources. And they also had to compete with other human beings who might be, having their eye on the same fruit that they're trying to capture. So here, what they believed is that if you get too happy, then it doesn't help. You have to be always um, concerned about your safety. You have to always watch out for your safety and for the next meal. And as a result, they didn't think much about happiness, and they felt that whatever I can get right now is what I need to focus on. So in a way, that the danger was always very close to us in that age. And it's a very similar thought when Saint Kabir says that the Lord of Death is just lurking behind you all the time. But if that is the case, then how do we live without fear and without any kind of concern about what may happen to us? And in some ways, it's true in the COVID era as well. Um, with the infection being so high, it's very difficult to figure out a way to, keep one's sanity intact. So one thing that this suggests is that the Upanishads talk about, like, how we are a part of the larger universe, a part of the global universe. And when we look at ourselves as a part of the global universe, and we see that the global universe has a purpose, it has a purpose of survival as a human species, and we are all humans, and we all need to survive for the species to continue and survive, then we look at ourselves slightly differently. Then we see ourselves as a part of the whole and not so much, as an individual human being. And then we nurture our feelings of sort of like, being a part of the community, and that becomes helpful. So, for example, when we think about ourselves as a creation of Brahman, then we see ourselves as more powerful. And when we see ourselves as sort of an atom in the universe, then we start looking at ourselves as someone very, very tiny, someone without any influence, without any effect. When we look at our world, for example, and it could be just our world of our family and friends and work colleagues, or our teachers, how whatever your world consists in, we see that we do play a role. We play a role in our families. We play a role in our workplace. We have exchange of ideas at our where we are studying at our school. And so we do contribute in our own ways. And it's not like we don't contribute at all. And that contribution is what we give to the world. And in return, we get what we get. So there's always an exchange of, contributions in the world. And that is what is important. Like, for example, when we worry about anything and we feel helpless, we are in a way in the same situation as Prince Arjun was in the Gita. And when he asked Lord Krishna, "What is my role, and why should I wage this war? It's going to get me so much pain. It's going to get everybody so much pain. So is it still necessary to do that?" So again, we go back to the philosophy of Gita, where the Gita says that uh, things are in a way preordained, and in a way you have a choice to do what you're supposed to do. So once you know what your purpose is, then you know that that is the right thing to do. So, for example, the purpose of Prince Arjun's life was to fight the war to the best of his abilities, and to win the war and to establish justice in the world. So when we understand these concepts, then we don't, have anxiety. And then we don't say to ourselves, like, what is going to happen? Because as long as we do the right thing, as long as we are following our purpose, then everything else sort of takes care of itself because it's a part of the, global universe that is working towards a certain purpose, certain goal. So for the global universe, it could be the survival of the species, and for individuals, it could be like moving ourselves towards the goal of moksha, towards the goal of happiness, towards the goal of joy. So now I'll come back a little bit again to how Eckhart Tolle describes life and life situations. So he says that life is what we have. He calls that being. So when we are thinking about ourselves, we are normally thinking about what's happening to us. We are really thinking about the fact that oh, we are alive, and that is such a joy. That happens very rarely, but that is what our real sense or essence of life is. And that is the sense in which we need to be grateful for this life, because this life is really our tool to get whatever we want. And the ultimate goal is really being happy and experiencing that joy and that bliss. But in the process, we have so many things we need to do. Like we need to work, we need to study, we need to look after our family, we need to look after ourselves. So all those things sort of, fall in place when we understand, first of all, that the abstract principle is to be thankful for what we have, and which is life. And Saint Kabir talks a lot about how to be grateful for the life, and how life is really what is given to us, which is absolutely a blissful experience, and it is what he calls as Sukha Sagar, meaning like the ocean of happiness. So when Saint Kabir talks about the ocean of happiness, he's talking about how we are given this human birth, and he requests all of us, saying, "Sukha sagar mein aiki mat jari pyasa, ajab samajh nar bawari, jam karat nirasa." So here, what he's saying is that you come to the ocean of happiness, and by that he means life. And so then don't go back thirsty. Enjoy life. And then he says that people find it very strange that the Lord of Death is just hanging around near the corner. And so he also sort of structures the problem. The philosophical problem here is that this is a situation that we have this life, and yet we are not able to enjoy our life, and we find it very strange that the life is going to come to an end, because if that was the case, then why do we have this life to begin with? So then, having structured this problem, then Saint Kabir goes on to provide solutions for us as well. And so he describes it like, in the very beginning, that this is the ocean of happiness, Sukha Sagar. So Sukha Sagar mein aike. The reason why we are here in this life, in this birth, human birth, is because, it's a part of divine love that's propelled us to come into this life. And then what is the solution for all these problems? And then we'll come to it in a minute. But before that, I want to, talk a little bit more about how to deal with the anxieties about future and resentments about the past. So we started with the Upanishadic ideas about, how to get control over one's anxieties. And one of the stories, I believe it comes in the Mandukya Upanishad, which is very beautiful, is the story of two birds which are on the same branch of a tree. And it talks about how these two birds are very different in nature. And one bird is called Jiva or Atman or soul, and the other bird is Shiva. And the soul doesn't know that the other bird is the Ishwar or the God. And when the bird, which is soul, is observing the other bird, uh, this first bird realizes that the other bird has absolutely no desires in life, seems to not require any kind of food, water, anything of the kind, and just seems to observe all the time things around us and seems perfectly happy. Whereas the Jiva bird, which is the human bird, always requires something, is always in pursuit of something, and as a result, is always unhappy because sometimes the pursuits yield the right fruit, sometimes the pursuits do not yield the right fruit. So the ups and downs in life are like that. When we get what we want, we're happy. When we don't get what we want, we are unhappy. When there are problems, we are unhappy. When there are good things happening around us, then we are happy. And then we're constantly sort of pulled in one direction or the other. And the stability that the other bird has is completely missing in our lives. So one of the things that we find as an answer, which is both in terms of Stoic philosophy as well as in the philosophy of Saint Kabir, is that they accept life as it is, and that is what the Upanishads are trying to say here as well. So the acceptance of life, which is sometimes also seen as the surrender of life, surrender of the situation in life, is what Saint Kabir refers to as. He says that may he calls himself dasa, like may dasa, and he says that God is the uh, Lord, and I'm going to basically follow his instructions. Now, when we look at that, sometimes, especially some of us who might be atheists find that very difficult. Um, but when we look at the other formulation of the same thought, which we see in Stoicism, it becomes somewhat more acceptable, approachable. And the Stoics talk about how we have to accept life as it is. So, for example, if there's something that's really bothering us and something that's sort of taking us away from our sense of rationality and making it difficult for us to take a good decision, the first thing we can do is accept life as it is and say, okay, a lot of bad things have happened in this year, in the past, and it's making it very difficult for me um, to get over the grief or the disappointment of those situations. Uh, but if I just accept the life, if I just accept the situation as it is, then I can think about how I can uh, get the situation under control. What is it that I can do that makes me live a better life? But if I don't accept that, if I don't accept that something has gone wrong, then I spend all my time in just asking the question, why me? Why did it happen to me? I had done good things in life, and why does it happen in a way that I can't function anymore? So to be able to function, and to be able to function in the most rational manner, the best thing to do is to accept life as it is. So, going back to the Upanishad example of the birds, what the human bird learns from watching the Shiva bird is that uh, what we need to do is accept life as it is, and to just observe what's happening around. If we question things that are happening around too much, and the things are completely out of our control, then we find it very difficult to do anything about it. But once we observe things as they are, once we observe our reactions to all those things as they are and accept them, then it makes it easier for us because our emotions are then under control. And then we spend the rest of our time in trying to figure out the best solutions for our situation. And according to the Upanishads, that's one way of getting over the anxiety issue. Now we turn to the second point, which is resentment about past. Now the resentment or sense of guilt also play a very big role in our lives. And the guilt is associated with the fact that sometimes we have done something that we could have done better, and then we feel bad that we acted in a way that we didn't need to. And resentment is normally about the past in which other people acted towards us, and then we feel like this was so unfair that it didn't need to happen to us. So again, various philosophers have various comments about these topics, and one common explanation that we find in the Upanishads is that it's all about avidya or non-wisdom. So when people are mature enough to understand what the right thing is, they'll always do the right thing. So if somebody is being unfair to you, then it's because they really have no clue how to do better. And you might say that, the person obviously knows that he or she is causing me so much damage and still they do it. So there are two ways to look at it. One is that they may not know that, this would ultimately actually be harmful to them as well. But it's also that, they are so overwhelmed by their emotions that they are incapable of choosing another path or doing anything else, or choosing the right action for that matter. And when that happens, then they end up doing something that they shouldn't be doing, and that is really sort of a result of avidya, meaning immaturity or non-wisdom. And it happens to us too. I mean, so many times, we do something and then we regret and we say, I wish I had thought differently about it in the past. And that's because that different opinion was not available to us at that time. We believed what we believed, and we believed that our way was the right way to do it. And we did not have access to more mature thinking or to any greater wisdom. And again, it happens because either we are unable to accept any greater wisdom, or because we have no access to any greater wisdom. So from a philosophical point of view, this is really sort of the result of not knowing better. And here, uh, one of the thinkings of Stoicism is like when they describe the shortness of life. And Seneca has written a book on that, and it's like this thought is available in practically every philosophy, where they say that life is short. I mean, even a span of 100 years seems very short when you're already closer towards the 100, and then you say, oh, but it was just yesterday that I was young, then I was doing this. When we're young, then we think like, oh, I can't imagine I'll ever be old. But life happens day by day, and then we just don't notice it. I mean, if we were to recall what happened exactly at a certain day when we were x years old, it becomes very difficult. I mean, we don't even remember sometimes what we had for lunch yesterday, because those things don't make such a big imprint on our mind, and then they seem so routine that we don't necessarily feel the need to remember every little detail. But at the same time, when we look at life and when we see that, oh, okay, life can come to an end just about any day, any time, and then suddenly we realize the shortness of life. And what What Epictetus or Seneca, who are the Stoic thinkers, remind people is that life is very short. And when you understand that life is short, then it actually propels you to do what you need to do, to focus on it, and to do it the right way. And if you believe that you have certain purpose in life, then you need to accomplish that before waiting, until it's too late to accomplish your purpose. When we come to Saint Kabir's philosophy, again we find a reflection of this thought in his writings as well. And one of the small dohas we see in Saint Kabir goes like this: "Kal kare so aaj kare so ab, pal mein pralay hoegi, phir karoge kab." So he refers to some big calamity that could happen within minutes. And then, if that happens, then you don't have time to do anything that you want to do in life. And therefore, it's better that we focus on our work, focus on now, on this moment, and do the best we can with our lives in this moment. So now we'll come to the solution of this problem. And the problem is, basically how to make the most of this moment when so much is going wrong and, when things are just out of control. So, how do we get control and how do we do the most we can? So, I want to go back to again Saint Kabir's poem that I had started with, which was Sukhasagar mein ai ke mat jare pyasa, ajab samajh ner bawari jama karat nirasa. So the further lines are like this: Nirmal nira bhare tere aage, pile swasa swasa, mrugatrushna jala chhad bavare, karo sudharas asa. So these are some of the analogies that Saint Kabir uses, and what he says is that you have nirmala nira, so you have pure water in front of you, and you're trying to go for mirage water. So first of all, stop your pursuit of delusions and figure out what is the pure water in front of you, and drink that. And the poem says, "Pile swasa swasa," meaning with every breath, drink what is pure water. And in this particular sense, he's referring to the fact that use your breathing for meditation, to remember God, to make sure that you breathe in and breathe out with the joy and the peace, and that makes life very meaningful. And then he says, Dhruva Prahlada Sukadeva Piya or Piya Redasa. So all these saints have shown us through their life examples that they have done this and it's possible to do it. Prema ki rasa sadamat wala, ek prema ki asa. And so he says that, what we really want in life is love, joy, and peace. And that is what these saints want as well. So kahe kabir suno bhai sadhu, mit gayi bhai ki pasa. So again, he comes to the point of how to get over the anxieties of death, dying, depression, or any kind of negativity in our life. And he says that suno bhai sadhu, mit gayi bhai ki pasa. So all of those anxieties sort of vanish when we understand that we have a limitation in life, that we have the human birth and human death. But in between, whatever period we are given, we use that to focus on our breathing, to live to the greatest of our abilities, and to focus on living joyfully and peacefully. So when we go to the philosophy of Eckhart Tolle, he talks about this in terms of life and life situations. So he says that life situations are always happening at all times. Something like, something happens and we are denied some opportunity, or something happens and we have lost something very valuable to us, or we have lost some person who is very close to us. So there are all kinds of life situations which completely cloud our thinking and make it very difficult for us to live life. But those are life situations, and those are still different from life. And life is basically being, just being alive and breathing. Because when breathing stops, then there's no life. So we have to separate those two things, which is the life and the life situation, and be grateful for the fact that we have life, that we are able to breathe. And again, I'll talk about um, one more pad or poem from Saint Kabir, which talks about श्वास श्वास पर हर भजो वृथा श्वास मत खोए श्वास बिराना पाहुना आना होए न होए. So Saint Kabir says here that you have to use every breath that you're given to remember God, uh, because shwas, or the breath, is such a strange guest that you just don't know whether the breath will be there the next time or not. So that's basically how I want to end my talk. What I did today was trying to focus on a few themes and try to sort of give examples from various philosophies to see if that makes sense to us. In my book, Philosophy and philosophy from the east to the west, or the spiritual philosophy, they all talk about similar concerns of life that we all face on a daily basis, and just borrowing different thoughts from different philosophies helps us understand that these are universal concerns, and they are faced by each one of us, no matter where we live, where we are, where we are born, what our background is. And therefore it makes it more appealing to accept those universal principles. So, we talked, for example, today how the current moment is very important and we need to use that to the best of our capacity. How the resentment or guilt about the past or anxieties about future cloud our thinking and make it difficult for us to be rational and to act wisely. And we looked at the solutions provided by Saint Kabir and other thinkers about how observing life, not reacting, and trying to figure out the best way possible, and using our breath as a tool to lead a good life can be done. So thank you again, and I appreciate your patience and your time.
Thank you so much, ma'am. This was such an holistic session for everyone. And this is such an introspection you have given about the moment we live in and about our life. I hope everyone has learned something valuable today. If there are any questions, you may write it in the chat section, or you can simply unmute your mic and ask, ma'am.
So, Ashwini, let me begin with a question that many of us are facing these days. So, this sense of loss, when we think of sense of loss, it is sort of always in the past because we had something and now we don't have it. So, if I'm understanding your point, it is that if we live in the present, then we will probably not have that sense of loss, or being in the present will help us overcome that loss. Uh, how easy? I mean, this question is often asked from most spiritual thinkers like Krishnamurti and others. How easy it is to forget your own history, because past is not just memories; it's also what has made us today. if you can comment on that.
Okay, I'll try. I should also mention that the spiritual thinkers, for example, have spiritual powers, so they have a far greater understanding. So, as a scholar, I can only try and sort of figure out some of the common themes and see if they're applicable. But all I have to say is a very feeble attempt of studying these philosophies. So it's my answer is only going to be worth 2 cents in a way. But what I've seen in these discussions is like, in this research is the way to deal with loss is first of all understanding that, no situation stays the same forever. So situation changes, and sometimes we also experienced gains in our lives, and the gains are followed by losses, and losses are followed by gains. And if we have that kind of perspective, then as the Gita would say, is that you have to have a equal distance from both from your gains and losses, from your defeats and your successes. So this conversation comes in the second chapter. Then talking about the past memories and the past history, we always have a history. I mean, even a 1-year-old child has a history, and all of us have our histories. So it doesn't mean that you have to forget what your history is. But it's important to sort of come to terms with that. Like once you accept your history, then it becomes much easier for you to see what is it that we can do. I mean, we have so many examples of people who, started their lives in utter poverty, and they really sort of like, made a life for themselves and for others. And then we also have examples of people who started their lives in riches, but they, couldn't really sort of make much of themselves. So we see people, in many different situations, but the question is like, how can you take control of your life and to not let the past history or memories dominate your present, but enable you to do something better?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other question?
Can I speak?
Oh, please, yeah.
Yeah, it was really a very nice exposition of the entire thought. You developed it so well, and
Thank
with
you.
yeah, with so many examples by Saint Kabir, who has been a guiding torch as far as philosophization and spirituality is concerned. I think all this sense, at intellectual level, we understand what we are supposed to do. But when it comes to actual doing, as you have rightly said, sometimes we can see actual knowledgeable people, jnani, typical uh, language of Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so Vidya and Avidya. So when we see other people doing that, I think it becomes easy to imbibe this knowledge and to perform it. Okay, that is, we learn through experience and observation. That is what ultimately matters. So I'm not asking any question. I just thought, that this seeing and doing is very important, and that is why perhaps in most of the spiritual traditions, the guru concept and basically Upanishad means sitting besides guru and understanding life, or and gaining knowledge. So that is what really makes sense. At intellectual level, it is more or less like information, but when we observe somebody doing that, then perhaps I think we hit the nail, or we are able to imbibe that philosophy in true sense of the term. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And thank you so much for sharing the thought.
I think we don't have any other questions. So, can we conclude the session then?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Thank you, ma'am, again for the session. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Nice seeing you all. Thank you. Good night.